Hello again. Okay, so the topic for today is kind of silly. It could be viewed as superficial slash silly slash dumb slash. I don't know if you're sexist, you're probably also going to have a problem with it, but that's not my issue. And it actually is about a phone conversation I had with my mom like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the situation that led up to that phone conversation. So, anyway, so man, where do I start? Oh, okay. Preface. So when I'm abroad, the only country that I haven't done this in is literally Morocco. When I'm abroad, I indiscriminately give my phone number, my WhatsApp specifically, out to people that I meet. Very indiscriminately. Everyone gets my WhatsApp. You literally almost, you just have to ask for it and I will give it to you. Honestly, unless I have unless you look like you're a serial killer or something, and I don't know what serial killers look like. That's the problem with serial killers, I guess, is no one knows what they look like. You're probably just going to get my WhatsApp number. So that's just how I roll. There's no kind of selectiveness. There's no kind of what is it called? Discrepancy? No, discernment. There's no discernment. Everyone gets Victoria's WhatsApp number when she's abroad, except in Morocco. This has been the exception. Anyways, okay. Also, another preface part two is if you know me well, or even sometimes if you don't know me well, but if you know me well specifically, you know that I freak out whenever I find out someone is Nigerian or Igbo or even just African, honestly, in the US. I freak all the way out. And if I hear Igbo on the street, or if I see someone who looks like they're Nigerian, or if they're wearing traditional Igbo garb or whatever, just African, honestly, in the US, I completely lose my mind and act very uncivilized. And that is what happens. So I usually go and bother the person too. So I'm not saying these are good habits, I'm just prefacing the story with this so it will make more sense. So, because I know that judgment is going to occur, and I just wanted to preface with some tendencies so you would know what's happening. So, I was like, why is the curtain moving? Can you see that? It stopped. The apartment's haunted. Just kidding, the window's open. Anyways, me and Hanaya were walking down the street with our friends from the boys' home, who I mentioned in the last video, and we were walking down the street, and I hear Igbo. This is in Cape Town, obviously. I hear Igbo, and I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I know what that guy was saying. That was Igbo. That's my language. Oh my gosh, they're Igbo. There's Nigerians here. This is so cool. A normal person is probably thinking, like, why are you freaking out? Why are you surprised to find Nigerians in South Africa? There's a lot of like inter-Africa immigration. I know all of this. I know all of this. I freak out regardless. So I'm freaking out, and I decide, okay, I should probably act like a civilized person for the first time since for the first time in the this will be the first instance in which I have the opportunity to act like a civilized person, because usually I lose my mind and go bother the people. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep moving, like ignore it, calm down, it's going to be fine. And I was like, so my friends are like, do you want to talk to them? And I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's okay. I don't need to go bother them. And this is probably the first time I have ever reacted like that. All the other times, I'm 1000% like, oh my god, are you Igbo? Where are you from? Like, in Nigeria, my parents are Igbo, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so I didn't do that this time. But one of my friends that we're with decides that this calm reaction is not what he wanted that night. So he goes up to the men. It was like a group of 5 men that were speaking in Igbo. He goes up to the men, he taps one of them on the shoulder, and he goes, that's your sister over there. Like, she's Igbo, she knows what you're saying, and she wants to talk to you. I didn't say like 50% of the things that came out of his mouth in that little dialogue. I only said that they were Igbo, and I started freaking out. But nevertheless, the guy, who I will dub the name Obi, because like I feel like 40% of Igbo men are named Obi. So Obi comes up to me and was like, "Hi, do you speak Igbo? Like, are you Igbo? What's going on?" And I was like, "Well, I wasn't trying to make a scene, but my parents are Igbo, and I'm just here studying abroad. Like, how are you? I heard the Igbo. I freaked out. It's really cool to run into Nigerians. It always makes me smile. Always makes me really happy." And so he was like, "Yeah, uh, let me get your WhatsApp. Maybe we can talk." And I was like, "Okay, sure." Like, if I have no barriers to giving my WhatsApp out to people I have nothing in common with, then an Igbo man is just going to get. That's just, it was his before he asked for it, honestly. And so, which I'm not saying is a good thing. I'm just saying this is what I do, and it's probably not going to change. So I gave him my WhatsApp, and we left. We said goodbye, and we left. So it gets to be the next day, perhaps. Perhaps it was still that same day, I'm not sure. And he texts me, and he is like, "Hello, Chi." And he started talking about how he likes to call me Chi because his late sister was also named Chinyere, I think. I think she was named Chinyere. She wasn't named Chinyere. There's so many other Chi names that she was named. And he called her Chi endearingly, and she died in February. And he told me all of this in our first conversation, and I was like, "Wow, this is really heavy. Like, you just met me for 2 minutes, if that, on the side of the street, and now we're talking about your dead sister, and now you're calling me her nickname. Like, this is kind of wow, but it's okay. Like, it's okay. We're Nigerian, we're Igbo, we can have this sense of intimacy, I guess, whatever." So Obi, we start talking, and he wants me to practice my Igbo, so we're texting in Igbo, and we're talking about South Africa and why we're there. Um, and eventually, the conversation sort of gets very flirtatious, which I will attribute to a thing that, pause that topic, that story for a second, which I like to call oil, African oil. If you follow me on Snapchat, not if you just started following me on Snapchat in Morocco, where I've been essentially inactive, but if you follow me on Snapchat from the US, you've heard my rants about what I like to call African oil. And I wouldn't be mentioning this because I'm not completely sure this is appropriate, but I feel like it's going to give context to the conversation I talk about with my mom in a few minutes. So African oil is essentially this behavior, I guess. It is, oh man, I don't know how to explain this in an educated environment. That's not my Snapchat story where I can say whatever I want. African oil is this manner of flirting, is this manner of presenting yourself in a romantic slash sexual fashion that is very, very dramatic, that is very forward, that is very dominating, I guess, is how I'd like to call it. That's very all encompassing, very powerful, very passionate all at once. I call it African oil because it's the phenomenon that I've witnessed with African men specifically. And it's this way of being, I'll talk about this actually 2 videos from now. It's this way of flirting that's just very quickly progressive, that's very just, you sort of, I call it oil because it's sort of hard to get off of you, in the same way that once you've stained clothes with oil or something, or when you have oil on your hand, it's not easily removed. It's very grimy, it's very sticky, and I'm obviously not saying all African men do this because that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying this is a phenomenon that I've observed, that I've call it African oil. So you'll meet an African man, for example, and you'll say hi to him, and then 5 minutes later, he's asking you if you have, he's telling you you're the most beautiful woman he's ever seen in his entire life, the most beautiful woman that God has ever made, the most beautiful woman that God is even capable of making, like you're at the limits of God's beauty making abilities, the woman above all women, the woman that all women should strive to be, that your beauty is what brings the sun up every morning, that makes the sun set every evening, that, the ground you walk on, like roses ought to shoot out of your footsteps because you're just so beautiful, the ground doesn't even deserve your feet. just wild, crazy, like, how did this escalate to this level when you've only known me for 5 minutes? And then they want you to marry them, and then they're saying things like, I've just been waiting my whole life to meet you, I just didn't know it yet, like, it's so amazing that God blessed me to be at this moment with you. Like, this is the oil. This is the oil, and when there's a huge amount of it, I like to call it the oil spill. Anyways, so Obi was oily, and so the conversation quickly turns very flirtatious on his part. So he's saying all these things, and I'm just like shrugging them off because I'm unfazed, because I'm only in South Africa for a month, and I have zero interest in starting a romantic relationship with this man who I just met on the side of the street. Which sounds like a very educated stance, but that's not usually my stance. Anyways, so I leave South Africa, and we were supposed to hang out one day, but he was busy, something broke with his phone or whatever. And so I leave South Africa, and he was quite distraught that I left without hanging out with him. And I was like, I'm sorry, but like, I mean, you only met me for 2 minutes on the street. Like, we text a lot so I can practice my Igbo, but other than that, like, we're just chilling. Anyways, so I say all of this to say, I tell this story that is probably having every person watching this roll their eyes. I said this story to say that a few weeks ago, Obi, I almost said his name, Obi texts me on WhatsApp, and he's like, Chi, have you forgotten me? And I was like, no, I haven't. Like, I haven't forgotten you. Like, you were chill. It's just that, I was in Peru, and then I was doing RA training, and now I'm in Morocco, and I have class all day. Wi-Fi is hard to come by. I'm reading. I'm doing research. Like, it's not that I forgot about you. It's just that I've been very busy. And he was like, oh, okay, when are you coming back to South Africa? Or have you left South Africa? And I was like, yes, I left. I'm in Morocco now. That was only 4 months. And so he's like, when are you coming back? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. All these trips I've taken have been very, very, very heavily subsidized and kindly subsidized. I don't have the money to just like jump on a plane to South Africa for the weekend or whatever, though I'd love to come back. I was looking at grad school at the University of Cape Town, for God's sake. So I'd love to come back, but I don't know. And he was like, well, you left before I could tell you what I really wanted to say. And I was like, oh no. I feel like zero good things can come out of this conversation. See, you just know when someone says something, especially the oil, this oil phenomenon. I promise I'll talk about it more in depth 2 videos from now. This oil, when you're slipping in the oil, you know that nothing good can come out of it. Even you just know. So he's talking, and he said that there's something I've always wanted to tell you, and I was like, oh no, oh no, no, okay, what is it? He was like, from the first moment I saw you, I fell madly in love with you. And I was like, oh my gosh, here is the oil spill. Call the environmentalists. What's happening? Why is this happening? Why does this always happen? And so I look at it, and I'm like, you can't be in love with me because you only met me for 2 minutes, and we texted on WhatsApp, and that was the end of that. You physically or emotionally cannot be in love with someone that you only met for 2 minutes and that you only have contact with on WhatsApp. You don't know me. You don't know zero things about me. You don't know what I like. You don't know what I dislike. You don't know what makes me rant, which is everything, I guess. You don't know my interests. You don't know my history. You just don't know me. Like, you're in love with something, I suppose. I'll give you that, but it's not chinyere because you don't know me. And we're talking, and he was like, how can you say that I'm not in love with you? Doesn't all love start with, first sight and blah, blah, blah. And I get infuriated. I don't usually get infuriated. I'm usually good with the oil. I know that if you get some detergent, you can eventually sort of rub it out. But this time, I was just mad. I was just infuriated. And I was thinking, and so I formed this very elaborate rant in my head. I don't know if anyone else does this. When you get angry, you pick up some like academic, social justice pitchfork, because that's what I do. So I'm going through this rant in my head, and I'm going to call my mom, and I'm going to tell her this is the problem with you. This is one of the many problems with African society. Like, we raise our men to be so emotionally numb that when they feel the slightest emotion, they call it, unending, undying, passionate love, because they don't know what a crush is, because we teach our men to be emotionally neutral at all times, because the women have to do all the emotional labor in Nigerian and African society, because the women are oppressed, blah, 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 blah. I was going off. I had strung together this just beautiful argument on emotional labor and sexism and shame and love, and how we don't how the word for love in Igbo is, looking in your eyes, like all of this, like beads. I was ready to wear it. I was ready to send it to my mom. So I call her, and I'm like, you'll never believe what Obi said to me. I don't even think I had mentioned Obi to her before, because it wasn't relevant. And if you know Nigerian moms, you don't mention that you gave your number to a random person on the side of the street. Actually, I may have mentioned this. Anyways, you'll never believe what Obi said. He said he's in love with me, and I told him that he can't be in love with me because he doesn't know who I am, because he doesn't know my interests, he doesn't know what makes me angry, because he doesn't know, because he only met me for 2 minutes. What is this absurdity? Why do we call things love that aren't love? What is wrong with African society? Blah, 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 blah. I'm going off. And my mom listens to me go off. She listens to me go off. And then she cuts me off. And she goes, Victoria. And I'm like, yes. And she's like, did you ever stop to consider that what Obi is calling love is not what you are calling love? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she broke down to me that, like, in my definition of love, which is very heavily based on Quora and university life and middle class America and academics and all of this stuff. In my version of love, you can only love someone you know, and you can only love someone you know very well. Um, that is a prerequisite for my version, my American middle class, Quora, Facebook savvy version of love. Obi's version of love is not mine. And it's not mine. And when I explained to him that he couldn't love me because he had not known me for a long time, he like, and I said it, and I was so angry, and I was wondering what was wrong with him, how he couldn't put this together, that obviously you can't love someone that you met for 2 minutes on the side of the street because you only met them for 2 minutes on the side of the street. It didn't even occur to me that obviously we're not talking about the same thing, because it was literally impossible for him to feel the emotion that I was calling love. But the emotion that he was calling love was literally not what I was calling love. In that, when I stated my definition of the word, I was so angry that I didn't even realize that we weren't talking about the same thing, because I'm talking about a knowledge-based love and he's not talking about a knowledge-based love, but we're both using the word love, and I am saying that the word is only my definition and only draws meaning from my definition, and that if you don't understand my definition, you're dumb and you're playing into sexist tropes of Igbo society, blah, 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 blah. My mom said, have you ever considered that what Obi is calling love is not what you're calling love? That this emotion that Obi feels towards you is not love as you would define it? Are you saying that he's not allowed to use the word love? Are you saying that he's not allowed to use the word? Are you saying that you own the word love because you have a particular definition for it? And I thought about it, and she gave me this whole lecture on how I'm supposed to know better because I'm doing sociolinguistic research, and I'm always talking about how words mean different things in different languages. And I should have known better. I should have thought about that. But I was really like, wow. It made me think about what other things I like arm a war for. I think I just tried to translate like a Spanish idiom and then take it to English or Igbo, and it did not work. What other things I get very worked up about? that I'm so worked up about that I can't even see where someone else is coming from. Literally so worked up about that I cannot see that we're coming from two diametrically opposed directions. Like, I'm screaming at this man about how you cannot love me, you knew me for 2 minutes. And he's saying, I love you, I knew you for 2 minutes. And I'm like, but you didn't know me for more than 2 minutes. And he's like, exactly, I didn't know you for more than 2 minutes. And we're talking past each other. And I'm about to flame the man because I'm just so up here. I'm just so in my head. I just wanted something. I just wanted to be mad. I think I just wanted to be mad. I was set off, and I was so set off that I didn't even realize that I had an outlet out of my anger. And so, I don't know. It just made me think, how many things do we get ourselves worked up about, that we get ourselves so worked up about that we can't even realize that that we may not be right. I feel like I do that a lot. But this was one occasion I was like, wow, that's really interesting. It also made me think about the way that I define love. Again, I keep mentioning Quora, 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 Quora. Quora is this question and answer site that I am obsessed with, that I spent, when I wake up in the morning, the first site I go to is Quora. Um, and they say a lot about relationships, and so that's what I read. If you are going to get a Quora, because I mentioned it in this video, I will recommend some writers when I post the video. But so it really made me think about how I've come to define love versus how other cultures might define love. Other things that made me think about were, for example, my mom was talking to me about how in Igbo society love isn't really a thing, which I knew, and I'm not, wait, don't like go crazy. When I say love isn't really a thing, I mean romantic love is still a relatively new concept, in that marriage up until very recently in Igbo culture was just a business arrangement, which it was in many cultures around the world, but I think Western culture moved past that a lot quicker than Igbo culture has moved past it. And so my mom was explaining to me, and I'm not saying that any of our opinions here are right, I'm just saying that the realization that this put me through. My mom was explaining to me that um, because the sexes, because the gender roles, because the sexes really are so split in Igbo society, whenever you want to interact with someone of the opposite sex, whenever you feel some sort of crush, infatuation, when you feel some sort of infatuation for someone of the opposite sex, Western society has taught Igbos and Nigerians, I guess in general, if I want to talk in general, but I shouldn't, has taught this society that the word love is what you use when you feel something for someone else. Whereas Western society has all this category of you just have a crush, you're just infatuated, you're just in lust, you're just blah 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 blah, all these words, and then we save love for the very end. But Igbo society uses love for all of these. And so for someone who is not familiar, you can very easily get very angry or very indignant, as I was, when someone says they are in love with you and they've only known you for a little bit of time, because they're not using the word love in the way that you use the word love. They're using the word love in the way they've been taught to use the word love. And neither of you have a claim on the word love, or what the word love means. So that was just very interesting for me. It's also, one last takeaway from this is that I should know this theoretically, right? Because my family is Igbo, right? And and so much of my life has been influenced by Nigerian culture. You think I would know this, but I did not know this. So, and I discussed this with my mom as well. So the takeaway I got from this is, like, you can grow up in a culture all your life, or grow up surrounded by a certain culture or whatever, and there's still learning to be done. Like, you're not this expert on whatever you claim to be an expert on just because you grew up in it, or were exposed to it, or traveled there for a month, or traveled there for 5 months, or whatever. You would think I would know. Granted, now, and I will talk about this more tomorrow, my experience with Igbos and Nigerians has been in the form of, they have filled three roles in my life. Auntie, uncle, and, that is your brother, or that is your sister, or that is your cousin, or whatever. I call them frozens, most of them. If I've known them my whole life, friend cousins, because we're not related, but we might as well be. So I've never, until Argentina, I had never had to deal with, I had never met Nigerians outside that did not fall into one of those three categories, um, unless they were just like a friend that I made at school or something, which don't count as like, which don't count, I guess. Those are different. Those are different. Those are in a different category. Everyone else is an auntie, uncle, or cousin. So this was the first time that I was having to interact with someone from Igbo culture in a sphere that I had never interacted with Igbo culture in before, which was a romantic sphere ever. So I did not know what Igbo culture looked like in a romantic sphere because I had never been there. So it's just so much of your own culture that you don't know. You cannot make these grand claims. Like I talk about like Nigerian or African oil or whatever on my Snapchat story, but at the same time, there's just so many things I don't know. So many things I don't know. I did not grow up in Nigeria. I was born and raised in Florence, South Carolina. I'm American with Nigerian parents with Nigerian ancestry. And I consider that to be a huge part of me, but there are so many things that I just don't know. And so you just can't make assumptions. So when someone says something to you, think about where they could be coming from before you prepare a whole speech on revolutionizing gender dynamics in your parents' home country. And also just think about how little you know about certain things. You don't know it all. So that's something I learned from Obi on the streets in South Africa, who said he's in love with me. He just followed me on Instagram if you want an update. So I know this video may come off as superficial, but I don't know, I thought it was an important message because that really blew my mind away. That's something that I took as a definition, as a rock core definition, could just not be a definition. So that's what I was trying to communicate. I hope I communicated it, and I will see you tomorrow.